You know, the thing I don't like about Teal Swan is how her story has changed so many times over the years. She'd made a great many claims about her youth, about certain things that happened, about abuse from a person that the family called Doc, and a lot of it is complete and utter nonsense. Demonstrably, there is no supporting data for it. She alleges that she was taken out of her bedroom over and over, and this is a point I've brought up many times. She claims every night she was removed from her bedroom by her abuser, heavily drugged, mostly ketamine, as well as some other drugs, and she was taken to various locations. Allegedly, Satanists would kill babies, and she would witness this. She was, half under, and she would witness some of these things. They would take her blood and drink it. She's also claimed that she was taken to a Mormon cult, some weird little wacky organisation, where they would try and, what's the term, exorcise her of her demons, because they believed that her having hypersensitivity was demonic. The Satanists believed that she was blessed, some kind of oracle. In fact, I was watching a podcast earlier, listening to a podcast, where they were talking about this very subject. And I noticed all the discrepancies in the story, because the podcast was trying to be as clear as possible with the story on a script. Good idea. Best thing to do if you're doing a podcast. But if you're a person like me, who's seen the story change a few times now, you'll know there's a problem in there. So let's just say there was a cult involved, right? She used to say back in the day it was a Mormon cult. She used to make out at one point her parents were in it too. Then she changed her mind. She used to claim then there was a satanic cult. But what about the Mormon cult? Oh, there's that too. Oh, there's that too. Okay, you're shoehorning all that together. All of that in. Okay. And you were taken pretty much every night. Well, yeah, every night. Okay. Over the course of how many years? Oh, okay, so that's literally thousands upon thousands of nights. And at no point, at no time, was there suspicion from your brother, your father, nor your mother while you were a child, from, I believe, a very young age, like 5 or 6. So thousands of days, thousands of nights, where you were taken and allegedly abused. And the reason why you were with this family friend, who was helping to do some kind of therapy on occasion, was because they were a bit of an amateur, a veterinarian. They were one who looked after animals, right? So, yeah, your family sent you to that person for therapy. It just sounds like they were trying to help out with hypersensitivity. We don't know how many times you actually met this person. And you allege it was thousands of times every day for many, many years, or nearly every day. Stories vary once again. You said on some occasions it was every night, other occasions it was a few times a week. Make your mind up. So, yeah, there's that. Now, the idea of a couple of cults. Okay. Oh, cults exist, say your fans. But do they exist as you say, as you claim? Not quite, no. So you've pretty much just made, you've made your fans accept that you must have been in one or a couple of cults since you've changed your story, because cults exist. And, where are the dead children? And where did they come from? Well, there's thousands of missing persons cases every year. It must be that. Oh, right, okay. And, I mean, can you prove that in any way, shape or form? Oh, there's also immigrants there as well. What, illegal immigrants? Yeah, okay. So their kids could be stolen. If they went to the authorities, they would be deported. Their kids would never be seen again. So fear kept them in line. That's what you said when you were on Fox. So it's just very convenient. In fact, that's what the police noticed when they did an initial investigation and your complaint against the member of the family, the friend of the family, who was actually offering assistance to you over your hypersensitivity. So they're just basically a friend of the family, it just seems. I don't know, there could have been abuse involved. How much, we don't know. The main reason charges weren't fully pressed was because you backed out. That's a different story, isn't it? That's a different story. You backed out. You didn't say that originally. You said that the police brushed you off and said there wasn't enough evidence. Turns out, according to various sources, you filed a complaint, didn't testify, and that's why the case fell apart. Ages later, you went back to the police to try and do the same again, and they found out your therapist was in fact part of this satanic craze, where they claimed there's satanic cults everywhere. They used a lot of suggestion, a lot of quackery, and put a lot of bullshit into people's heads. Maybe that's why the story's changed so many times. You know? You're rediscovering stuff in dreams, or rediscovering. You're rediscovering stuff in your own hypnotic states. And then you call that evidential. And then you appear on television, and then you appear on YouTube. Not in that order, in fact. On YouTube for many years, and eventually on television. And you make it proves your case. It proves your case. Any discrepancies in the story? Well, it's because you were very confused, obviously. Any inaccuracies? It's because you were confused. But you're willing to spread the idea that a person abused you, even though you weren't willing to testify. And then when you supposedly changed your mind, the police didn't take you seriously. That's what you said. You said they didn't take you seriously. You didn't mention the other case before, but you changed the story again. And then it actually comes out that the reason why they didn't follow through with the case the second time around after the investigation, after you wanted to press charges and you backed out because you didn't want to press charges, the actual story was they were aware of Barbara, your therapist, or former therapist, who was a renowned fraudster, who had in fact been involved in several criminal cases, and they actually tested her with at least one criminal case where they fed false information to the therapist, and she brought forward all of this information under hypnotherapy with this particular witness, and it was actually all made up altogether. So yeah, you know, it's very dangerous, the kind of game that she was playing, and it's clearly damaged Teal considerably. Now, am I saying I know that Teal had no abuse in her childhood? No, she probably did in some way, shape or form. But also she was renowned in her community, and obviously within her family, as being hypersensitive. She had extreme sensitivity. I'm not talking psychic shit, I'm talking about she was emotionally distraught most of the time. She was obsessed with a few little things. She showed signs of, I don't know, arguably some signs of autism, to be honest. And, you know, say if she did have Asperger or something like that, many people live productive enough lives. And it seems like her hypersensitivity wasn't simply rooted in simple Asperger's. It could have been, at least if you follow some of the ideas in her story, that she always saw energy. She could easily have overstimulation of certain visual centres which could relate to schizophrenia. Arguably. So it's very easy to imagine how Teal Swan could in fact be a person with at least mild mental conditions which could have led her down a path of delusion and fantasy. And many years later, after dealing largely with depression, very dark depression, which she claims was down to the abuse, but we've got no evidence for that. And then she goes to a therapist who makes it all right. Oh, this is why you're fucked up. This is why you're a fucked up human being, Teal. It's got nothing to do with basically, but your parents being in some ways not necessarily able to raise you because of your difficulties, because of people being unable to diagnose you. You know, you're the same sort of age as me, so it's understandable that's difficult. You know, we come from the same generation. And, yeah. Basically, you end up with a situation where there's a lot of claims, a lack of evidence, that people are willing to believe because they're fans. They're willing to ignore the story changes by shoehorning things in. Oh, it wasn't just a Mormon cult, no, it's a satanic cult. It wasn't just a satanic cult, it was a Mormon cult. Oh, were they the same organisation? Yes. Turns out, oh no, she's changed that as well. They were separate organisations. They weren't the same organisation. Oh, right, okay. What, the Mormons were a cover for the satanic cult? Okay, why did you keep on changing your story? You've seen children murdered? When did that story kick in? Oh, that story didn't kick in for a long time. So, yeah, these things have changed a lot. And people actually living and going regularly to the Teal Swan household, you know, they've actually had her tell them that she was at one point a prostitute, that she at one point had a major drug problem. And this is all when she was supposedly, not in this cult, she was supposedly taken away every night or every other night to a satanic cult, or was it a Mormon cult? Or was it some kind of Luciferian cult, whatever, Illuminati cult? Or was it a pedophile cult? Or what was it? So that's the problem. The story has changed so many times and so many little things have been dropped here and there. It actually makes you think, hang on, this is bullshit. But anyway, just checking on my phone. The name of the podcast, it's a podcast on iHeart Radio, and the podcast is called, you should be able to find this in any Google search, The Suicide Catalyst, Teal Swan. And it basically covers some of her story. A little write-up on here as well. This, by the way, came out on the 28th of January 2020. A 56-minute talk through her life. In 2011, Teal Swan began making YouTube videos claiming she was an extrasensory alien tasked with healing the world of its miseries. Interestingly, though, Teal Swan was actually on YouTube before that. Yeah. She actually took down a lot of videos back in the day. I think she may have even had another channel at one point. Because I remember her being around when this is when I first used to go on the internet regularly, onto YouTube. Because I used to watch this other wacky cult called the Destiny Cult. And some of their wacky ideas. I used to watch some of the videos of like Sylvia Brown and others, which were put onto YouTube. So we're going back at least until 2008, when I used to notice some of her work out there. I know this because by the time of 2011, I'd made videos about Teal Swan. So she was obviously talking about this a lot before. And also, it's worth noting that I had the internet before that. I used to have to go to the library. So I remember back in around about 2008, maybe a little bit later, but I think it's 2008, watching videos which included Teal Swan's videos. She's a very distinctive character. And they were on there at the local library. I watched it on the computers at the local library with headphones. And yeah, she's been around for quite a while. But once again, deleting her history. There's a lot of old videos, as well as some old interviews, where she had very different stories. Very different stories. So, yeah. And sometimes vaguely nonchalant kind of responses. Where a person would talk about, I had a problem with my depression, and I had this, I had that. And she's like, oh, tell me about it. Yeah, I had so many problems at that age. And it kind of contrasts with the fact, oh yeah, but you claimed that you were being taken away every night to be abused in a satanic or a Mormon or whatever cult. And a lot of these details about, murder and, it was immigrant kids being killed and all this kind of stuff. A lot of this stuff came a lot later. An awful lot later. So we're talking years later. So many years after the event, she had all these broad claims. She added into it later on in a kind of regression therapy stuff, where she was making the therapy, the hypnotherapy that her previous therapist actually gave her, Barbara Snow, a known quack, Barbara Snow. She made it bad, so the claims came up. The police went, well, hang on, we've dealt with this woman before. We know that she is not a reliable source. We know she can influence people. And then you end up with Teal Swan over the years using various regressionary memory recovery methods, which can be incredibly leading as well, especially if you know what you're looking for. I'm looking for this. Oh, lo and behold, you find it. When you end up with that, it's no wonder she found so much abuse, so many problems in her life. It's worth looking into. And look at that podcast. Look at that podcast. And once again, it is called The Suicide Catalyst, Teal Swan. And it's quite interesting. It's a nice cult like podcast. It's called Cults, in fact. Or at least, or is it just under Cults? Let me have a look at this. They've got a little write-up as well. Okay, yeah. They've got a little write-up here about it, about the mystery, manipulation, murder cults are associated with, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so it's quite interesting. And every Tuesday, Greg and Vanessa, co-hosts of the podcast Serial Killers, probably another very good, very interesting podcast. And yeah, it's quite interesting. So I'll be listening to this in full on my way to have Sunday lunch with the family. So gives you a clue when I recorded this. But in any case, I think it's worth me capping this off now. In fact, my antivirus is popping up there. So please check out that podcast. See what you think and see if you can spot any of the story changes, because Teal leaves out a lot of stuff. And the people doing the podcast do a very good job from what I've heard so far. And I've only got as far as her reporting it to the police and mention of Barbara Snow. So, yeah. Consider, if you will.